Seches Kiddushin Daf and Hey continues the Gemara's discussion of the Machlekes between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda about when you use hektish, if it becomes chulin, and under what circumstances. The Gemara is going to bring in a Mishnah in Shkalim and try to explain it according to each opinion and see if we have a kasha from that Mishnah on how we understood Rabbi Meir. So as we recall, Rabbi Meir held that anytime you use something which is hektish, which is forbidden to use, and you use it b'mezid on purpose, you know it's hektish, and you specifically use it with intent anyway, then it becomes chulin. If you use it b'shegig, it does not become chulin. It stays hektish, and halachos of hektish continue. Rabbi Yehuda holds the opposite. He holds it becomes chulin when you use it b'shegig. If you use it b'mezid, it will not become chulin. So the Gemara brings the Mishnah in Shkalim, which discusses what happens if you find an animal wandering around lost outside Yerushalayim. It's likely that it is a carbon, because most animals in Yerushalayim were carbonis. So what should you do with it? Now we're referring to where it's from Yerushalayim to Migdal Eder, or a similar distance from Yerushalayim in a different direction, meaning the radius of the distance of Yerushalayim to Migdal Eder all around Yerushalayim. So you find this animal. So it depends if it's a male or if it's a female. So if it's a male, it has to be a carbon oila. The Gemara will ask later, why can't it be a number of other karbanos which are a male? But for now, it says it has to be an oila. So you assume that it's an oila. And the implication seems to be that you bring it as a carbon oila. If it's a female, then it could be a shlomim. So the Mishnah seems to say that you bring it as a shlomim. So now the Gemara asks on shlomim. Shlomim, if it's a female, it could be an oila or a shlomim. How do you know that it's a shlomim and not an oila? So on that, Rav Oishia explains first. The Gemara will have another explanation later, but Rav Oishia explains the only way to understand this is that you assume that it's either a oila or a shlomim, since both of those could be female. And then you have to bring it al tanai. How do you do that? How do you bring one animal as two karbonos? Or Rashi says, simple. You transfer its kedusha onto two piles of money that have value equal to this animal that you found. One of them, you take the money and you bring it as a carbon oila. So you're makdish that money is an oila. The other one, your makdish is a shlomim, and you bring it as a carbon shlomim. And you say as follows: if this animal was a carbon oila, its kedusha is transferred to the oila money, and the shlomim money is a nidava. It's a voluntary carbon that I wasn't a chayiv. And if it's the opposite, if it was a carbon shlomim, so then it's the kedusha of this animal is mischala onto the shlomim, and the oila that I'm bringing with the other money is voluntary. And that way you take care of everything and you do it right. So now the Gemara says, how do you get the kedusha off the animal onto the money? The only way you could do that is if you sell the animal for the money, and that would be me'ila, and then you can get the kedusha off by being mischalalit, because you did me'ila, you used the animal, and therefore you took the kedusha off. Now here, obviously, you're doing it b'mezid. So this has to be Rabbi Meir's opinion. He's the one who holds that the kedusha goes off b'mezid. If it would be Rabbi Yehuda, it wouldn't go off b'mezid at all. Now, the Gemara asks, hold on a second, Rabbi Meir only said that the kedusha goes off if you use hektish. When you're talking about something that has kedushas hadamim, that means the value of this was kaddish, and you could use it for the Beis HaMikdash. You could sell it, or you could use it to fix the Beis HaMikdash. You're talking about a carbon. Carbon is called kedushas haguf, which it itself goes on the mizbeach. On that, you can't get the kedusha off. You can't transfer it, even if you're mechalit. There is no way to redeem a carbon if it does not have a mum. So the Gemara brings a Mishnah which shows us this halacha. The Mishnah says that there's no me'ila after me'ila. If you do me'ila once, you can't be violating me'ila on that again, because the kedusha goes off, like we've been discussing. The kedusha goes off when you use hektish without the right to do that. Now, there's two exceptions, the Mishnah says, and that's a behemo, meaning a behemo of a carbon, and a klisharis. That if you have an animal that is meant to be a carbon and someone rides on it, it's still kadosh. The kedusha doesn't go off, and someone else could ride on it afterwards, and a long chain of people could ride on it, and they all violate me'ila. A cup of klisharis could be the same thing. The number of people drink it, still the me'ila still exists. So you see, therefore, something which has kedushas haguf, like a klisharis or a carbon, the Kedusha doesn't go off. Now, the Gemara answers very simply, this is not Rabbi Meir. If you're talking about Mi'ila, you're talking about a Shoygeg. There's only a carbon Mi'ila on a Shoygeg. So this is a Shoygeg. So if this is talking about the Kedusha going off on a Shoygeg, obviously not Rabbi Meir, it's obviously Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda is the one who holds Kedusha can go off on a Shoygeg. And therefore, there's Rabbi Yehuda, so you have no kasha on Rabbi Meir. We're learning our Mishnah and Shkala to be Rabbi Meir, not Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara says, but there's no difference between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda in the halacha of Kedusha Sagolf. The difference between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda is whether it goes off on a mazid or a shoygeg. You can prove that Kedusha doesn't go off on a shoygeg according to Rabbi Yehuda. The same thing is true on a mazid according to Rabbi Meir. So we're back to our kasha. Rabbi Meir would also say that Kedusha doesn't go off when it is Kedushas Haguf, even if it is b'mazid. The Gemara answers it's not true. There's a difference between a mazid and a shoygeg. A shoygeg you did not intend for it to become chulin, and therefore Kedushas Haguf doesn't become chulin. A mazid, which is what we are discussing, and we're in Rabbi Meir's opinion, is you intend for it to become chulin. If you intend for it to become chulin, even Kedushas Haguf becomes chulin. So therefore, this is another aspect of the machlekes between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Now, the Gemara asks on this whole Rav Oshia, this whole explanation, that this is the pshat in the Mishnah, that we never saw that Rabbi Meir says that using hektish b'mezid goes off, the kedusha is taken off. We never saw that by kachim kalam. You only saw that by kachim. Here you have kachim kalam, like a carbon shlamim. So who says that that's true? So Mark quotes that of the Rabbanan, which his name is Rabbi Yaakov, and it says it's a kavachemer. If kachim, the kedusha goes off, certainly kachim kalam, the kedusha goes off. So there's Chama bar Akiva, named Rav Yosef bar Chanina, same thing. Rabbi Meir said that hektish, that you use b'mezid, becomes chulin, whether it's kachim or kachim kalam, and it's a kavachemer. If kachim, which we've seen Rabbi Meir holds that way, becomes chulin, certainly kachim kalam, which is a lighter level of kedusha, certainly becomes chulin if you use it when you are not supposed to. Okay, now the Gemara goes back to Rav Oshia, and the Gemara has kashas again. So Rav Oshia explained that what's pshat in the Mishnah, you found an animal, it's a nekeva, could be a shlamim or an oila, so you transfer the kedusha onto money, which is an iser me'ila, and you bring both of them as karbanis, and you make a tanai. So Rav Yochanan says, how do you tell this person to do an avera? He found an animal, he wants to figure out what to do with it, so you tell him do an avera and be mechalo it, which you're not allowed to do. So that's not the right thing. So says Rabbi Yochanan a different pshat. You wait till it gets a mum. Once it gets a mum, the halacha is you're allowed to be paided. You're allowed to redeem it. So you bring two other animals, and you make one a shlam and one an oila. And you say that if this is one that I found is an oila, its kedusha transfers to the one that's an oila, and the shlamim is a nedava. If the one that I found is a nedava is a shlamim, then its kedusha transfers to this animal that's a shlamim, and the oila is a nedava. Okay, now the Gemara asks, how do we know that it's not other types of karbanas? So the Gemara asks separately on the male and on the female. So we said that the male, he brings a carbon oila. So Gemara asks, it could also be a carbon toida. So Gemara says, okay, bring a carbon toida also and make the same tanai on that. So Gemara says, but toida, you have to bring the bread with it. So Gemara says, okay, so bring the bread also al tanai. Not a problem. Says Gemara, maybe it's an asham. An asham you can't bring as an adava, so you can't make that tanai. So Gemara says an asham has to be at least 2 years old. We're talking about where this was not 2 years old. Says Gemara, maybe it's an asham mitzayir or an asham nazir, which is not 2 years old. Gemara says those are uncommon. They don't happen often. You don't have to assume. You can assume that the animal you found is not one of those. Says Gemara, maybe it's a carbon pesach, which has different halachos. So Gemara says, if it's Pesach time, so it's a carbon in its right time, people are very careful with the Pesach, they're not going to lose it, so you don't have to assume that. If it's not in the right time, then it's a shlamim, a carbon Pesach shalei bizmanai turns into a shlamim. So you keep the halachas of shlamim as we said. So Gemara says, well, maybe it's a bechar, or it's a carbon ma'aser behema. Both of those are shlamim, but they have different halachos. Gemara says, well, the different halacha that it has is that when it gets a mum, the owner can eat it. So here also, you get a mum, the owner can eat it, and you keep the halachos that it has of once you eat it, you can't measure it, you can't weigh it, you're not allowed to sell it in the store, and all the halachos that apply, so you keep those also. All right, that's for if you found the male animal. If you found the female, so we said that it's a shlamim, which means either shlamim or naila. Again, the Gemara asks, maybe it's a taida. The Gemara says, okay, bring a taida as well as part of it. Tanai, you need the bread, so bring the bread. The other Gemara asks, maybe it's a carbon chatas. So Gemara says, carbon chatas is within 1 year old. Here we're talking about where you found it, and it was obviously older than that. So the Gemara says maybe it's a chatas which was wandering around for a while and it became older. Well, we could still have Kiddushin chatas. The Gemara says that's not common, that a chatas is left to be over the age. So the Gemara says, okay, now what would the halacha be if you found a female and it was under a year old? So now it could be chatas. What would you do then? So we'll go to Braisa of Hanania ben Chachinai, who says if you found the goat who was 1 year old, then it could be brought as a chatas. Gemara says, bring us a chatas, really? Why should you assume it's a chatas? Gemara says, no. Only you actually bring us a chatas, we have to treat it with the chumras of a chatas, which means that you lock it and you have to wait until it dies by itself because there's nothing you could do with it. It's one of the chatas hamesais.